There's something about the 1970s that lingers in the bones of everyone who lived through it. It's not just the music or the fashion. It's a feeling, a texture to daily life that simply doesn't exist anymore. Today, we're going to explore what those who grew up in that decade truly miss and why those experiences shaped them in ways that are almost impossible to replicate. Let's start with something that seems almost unthinkable now. The sound of a rotary phone ringing in an empty house. That heavy mechanical ring that echoed through the hallway. You didn't know who was calling. There was no caller ID, no screen lighting up with a name and photo. Every ring was a mystery, a small lottery of possibilities. It could be your grandmother, your best friend, or a wrong number asking for someone named Harold. You'd race across the living room, sliding on the hardwood floor in your socks, lunging for that avocado green receiver mounted on the kitchen wall. You'd answer with a breathless, "Hello?" And the anticipation in that single word was electric. Today, we screen our calls. We let unknown numbers go to voicemail. But back then, you picked up every single time because the phone was a portal to the unexpected. You miss that. The surprise, the not knowing. And when someone called for you, when your mother shouted your name from the kitchen because it was your turn to talk, you felt important, chosen. The call was an event, not an interruption. You'd stretch that curly cord as far as it would go, pulling it around the corner, whispering into the receiver while the rest of the family pretended not to listen. Privacy was something you fought for, inch by inch, cord by cord. But phone calls were just one thread in a tapestry of analog connection. Think about the mail. Real, physical mail. The thud of the letterbox. The walk to the end of the driveway to retrieve a stack of envelopes, magazines, and occasionally, if you were lucky, a package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. You'd flip through the pile looking for your name, and when you found it, when there was an envelope addressed to you, the world stopped for a moment. A letter from a pen pal. A birthday card from a distant aunt with a crisp $5 bill folded inside. A handwritten note from a friend who moved away. These weren't notifications. They were artifacts. You held them, smelled them, tucked them into shoeboxes under your bed. Today, communication is instantaneous and disposable. But you understood that words could have weight, that ink on paper was a commitment, that someone sat down and chose to spend their time thinking about you. This sense of anticipation extended to everything. You didn't live in an on-demand world. You lived in a world of waiting, and that waiting made everything sweeter. Consider Saturday morning cartoons. Today, a child can watch any episode of any show at any moment. But you had to wake up early. You had to be present. You'd set yourself in front of that wood-paneled console television, the one that took 30 seconds to warm up, the picture slowly bleeding into focus from a single bright dot in the center of the screen. You'd watch the test pattern fade into the first animated frames of your favorite show. Looney Tunes, Speed Racer, Schoolhouse Rock between the programs, teaching you about conjunctions and the Constitution while you ate cereal straight from the box. If you slept in, you missed it. If you were dragged to a family errand, you missed it. And missing it meant waiting an entire week for another chance. This scarcity made those mornings sacred. You learned that presence matters, that some doors only open once. The same principle applied to music. You didn't have playlists or streaming services. You had the radio, and the radio was a game of patience and luck. You'd sit by your cassette player, finger hovering over the record button, waiting for your favorite song to come on. Sometimes you'd wait for hours. Sometimes you'd catch the tail end, cursing as the DJ talked over the intro. But when you captured it, when you got that clean recording from start to finish, you felt like you'd won the lottery. You'd play that song over and over, rewinding the tape with a pencil to save the batteries. The hiss of magnetic tape became the soundtrack of your youth. You knew every click and pop, every slight warp in the audio from too many plays. That song wasn't just data. It was a trophy. It was evidence of your patience and dedication. And then there were records. Vinyl. The ritual of sliding a disc from its sleeve, placing it on the turntable, and lowering the needle with surgical precision. You'd hear the initial crackle, that warm static that signaled the music was about to begin. You'd sit on the floor of your bedroom, the album covers spread across your lap, reading every word of the liner notes while the music filled the room. You knew the names of the bass players and the recording studios. You studied the artwork like it was a sacred text. Music was an experience, not a background track. It demanded your attention, and you gave it willingly. But the 1970s weren't just about consumption. They were about creation, often from nothing. You grew up in an era of making do. When something broke, you fixed it. When you wanted something, you built it. Consider the go-kart. Not the motorized kind you buy at a store. The kind you cobbled together from a wooden crate, 4 mismatched wheels, and a rope for steering. You spent entire weekends in the garage with your father's tools, measuring nothing, following no instructions, learning by failure. The first version tipped over when you turned. The second version had wheels that fell off. By the third version, you had something that could carry you down the hill at the end of your street, wind in your hair, heart in your throat. You didn't have safety equipment. You had the instinct to bail before you hit the fence, and you walked away from every crash with scraped elbows and a plan for version 4. This maker's mindset extended into the home. You watched your mother sew patches onto your jeans because new jeans were for special occasions. You watched your father rebuild the lawnmower engine on the garage floor, parts spread across newspaper, grease up to his elbows. Nothing was disposable. Everything had a second life if you were clever enough to give it one. You learned that the world wasn't something that happened to you. It was something you could shape with your own 2 hands. And shaping the world meant being outside in it. The 1970s were the golden age of the great outdoors, at least for children. Your mother would open the back door after breakfast, and you wouldn't return until the streetlights flickered on. That was the rule. Be home when the lights come on. No GPS, no check-in calls. Just a loose boundary and the faith that you'd figure out how to fill the hours. You filled them magnificently. You built dams in the creek, redirecting the water with rocks and mud until your sneakers were soaked through. You caught frogs and tadpoles in mayonnaise jars, poking holes in the lids with a fork. You climbed trees so high you could see the rooftops of the neighborhood, could spot your own house from a branch that swayed in the wind. You learned the taste of honeysuckle, pulling the stamens through the flower and touching the drop of sweetness to your tongue. You learned that nature was not a scheduled activity. It was your constant companion, your classroom, and your playground rolled into one. The smell of fresh-cut grass on a summer evening, the sound of cicadas rising and falling in the dusk, the feel of warm asphalt under your bare feet. These weren't memories. They were the very substance of your childhood. But perhaps what you miss most is the pace, the unstructured, unhurried rhythm of days that stretched like taffy. Today, every hour is optimized. Every moment is scheduled. Children move from activity to activity like tiny executives. But you had time, vast oceans of time. Time to be bored, which meant time to invent. Boredom was the mother of 1,000 games. You invented sports with rules only you and your friends understood. You created entire universes with action figures and cardboard boxes. You lay on your back in the grass and watched clouds transform into dragons and sailing ships. You learned to entertain yourself because no one was going to do it for you. And in that boredom, you found something precious. You found your imagination, your inner voice, the ability to sit with yourself in silence. That silence is gone now. Today, silence is a void to be filled immediately with podcasts, notifications, endless scrolling. But you knew how to be still. You knew how to listen to the nothing and hear everything. The distant bark of a dog, the whisper of wind through the screen door, the creak of the house settling in the afternoon heat. These sounds were the background music of a slower world. The evenings were their own kind of magic. Think about dinner time. The whole family gathered around a single table, eating food that someone had spent real time preparing. No screens, no distractions, just faces and voices and the clatter of forks against plates. You had to learn the art of conversation because there was nothing else to do. You had to sit with your siblings, even when they annoyed you. You had to listen to your parents talk about their day, even when it seemed boring. But in those moments, without knowing it, you were absorbing something vital. You were learning how to be part of a unit, how to share space and time with people you didn't choose, how to tolerate, to compromise, to laugh at a joke you didn't understand because the adults were laughing. The dinner table was a schoolroom for human connection, and the lessons you learned there stayed with you. After dinner, there was television, but not television as it exists now. You had 3 channels, maybe 4 if the weather was right and someone had adjusted the antenna on the roof. You didn't choose what to watch. You watched what was on, and you watched it together. The whole family, arranged in the living room, experiencing the same story at the same time. When a show ended on a cliffhanger, you had to wait until next week to find out what happened. You had to live with the uncertainty, the anticipation, the delicious agony of not knowing. You talked about it at school the next day. You theorized with your friends. You were part of a shared cultural moment that bound you to everyone else who was watching. Today, you can binge a season in a weekend and forget it a week later. But you remember storylines from 40 years ago because you lived with them week by week, for months at a time. And then the night would come, and the night was different then, darker, quieter. Without the blue glow of screens in every window, neighborhoods truly went to sleep. You'd lie in your bed, listening to the distant sound of a television through the wall, the muffled voices of your parents talking in the kitchen. You felt safe, contained, part of something. You fell asleep without an alarm set because summer mornings didn't require alarms. You fell asleep without knowing what tomorrow would bring because tomorrow was a blank canvas waiting to be filled. You fell asleep with the window open, a warm breeze carrying the scent of jasmine or cut grass or impending rain. What do you miss most about the 1970s? Everything and nothing. You miss the weight of a phone receiver in your hand. You miss the crackle of a record before the music starts. You miss the feeling of your mother's hand on your back as she ushered you out the door and into a day with no itinerary. But more than any single thing, you miss a way of being. A slowness, a presence, an acceptance that not everything needs to be documented, optimized, or shared. You grew up in a world that asked you to be patient, to be present, to figure things out for yourself. And those lessons shaped you into the person you are today. When you look at the world now, with its instant everything and its constant connection, you don't feel left behind. You feel like you're carrying something rare. A memory of what it felt like to wait for a letter, to earn a song, to build something with your own hands from scraps, to be truly, completely bored and discover what emerged from that emptiness. You are not nostalgic for a perfect time, because no time is perfect. You are nostalgic for a texture of life that has been sanded smooth, for edges and rough spots that taught you how to navigate, for a world that trusted you to fall down and get back up without anyone documenting the tumble. You carry the 1970s with you, not as a burden, but as a foundation. And every time you choose patience over speed, presence over distraction, creation over consumption, you're proving that those years weren't just history. They were training, and you've been putting that training to use ever since. If this brought back some memories, we'd love to hear in the comments what you miss most about growing up in the 1970s. And if you enjoyed this video, a like and a subscribe would mean a lot. We'll see you in the next one.